All right. And like I said, 460 school districts, 18,000 schools, and 12 million students across the country. And so if you want to know what we have been doing in 2025, you can scan that QR code to see our different press releases, our news updates, our policy updates. And at the end, you're actually going to hear about a couple of opportunities that you can engage with us later on, whether that is professional development, attending our conference, being a part of our EPFP program as a fellow. So please stay tuned and we'll let you know about other things we have going on. So with that, I want to introduce our speakers for today. Brenda K. Foster is a nationally recognized multifaceted communication strategist who applies her decades of experience to change how people think and feel about issues that affect us every day. In addition to serving as Vanguard's Chief of Innovation, she's a communications researcher and strategic planner who has shaped direction and messaging for numerous successful national nonprofits and government campaigns. A former broadcast journalist, which is what I wanted to be when I grew up, Brenda is a sought-after producer and speech and script and media writer for clients and spokespeople that include celebrities, CEOs, farmers, caregivers, advocates, and youth. She also served as the chair of the Manassas Park City School Board for nearly a decade. She's currently an adjunct professional lecturer at American University. Happy to have you, Brenda. Dr. Terry Farendi is a nationally recognized connector and catalyst who has spent her career helping young people and the systems they serve unlock their full potential. A trusted strategist and compelling storyteller, Terry brings more than 30 years of cross-sector leadership to advancing equity in education and youth development. As a founding partner at Collaborative Communications, she leads initiatives that strengthen networks, elevate unheard voices, and move bold ideas into lasting action. Terry's work spans philanthropy, government, nonprofits, and education, where she designs large-scale solutions that drive social impact. A leading voice in after-school and out-of-school time learning, Terry has helped shape the field through her long-standing leadership of the 50 State After-School Network, funded by the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation. She also serves as a strategic consultant to the National Summer Learning Association, where she curates content for national conferences and supports systems-level strategy. And our third speaker today is Krista Rowland, who believes in the power of uniting communities to create brighter future for all children. Before joining the IEL team, Krista was the Director of Community Impact at the United Way of Treasure Valley in Boise, Idaho, and she helped grow the system of community schools in Idaho, founded by the Idaho Community Schools Learning Network, and co-founded the Idaho Coalition for Community Schools. Krista began her career as a music educator, teaching hundreds of students the joy of creating music. She has a master's degree in public administration, a graduate certificate in nonprofit administration, and bachelor's degree in music education and violin performance. Please join me in welcoming all of our speakers for the day. All right, so with that, let's get started with our questions. All right, so Brenda, my first question is for you. So, what should organizations, practitioners, and educators who want to share their story and impact with policymakers prioritize in creating and implementing a strategic communications plan?
It's a nice big question. I'll try to get my answer down to less than an hour. Um, one of the things that I know as a practitioner is that if we are anything, we are storytellers. That's who we are as human beings. It's actually very natural for us to tell stories. It's actually a fault of mine that I tell too many. But when we get to actually having to make change, we tend to fall back on the data. And particularly, so being on the school board for a decade, data was important to us. Without the data, we couldn't make decisions. But I will tell you that every student, every teacher, every community member that came to speak with us made more of an impression than any of the data, right? And that's true of all policymakers. Individual people make the biggest difference. And so what I try to do is find a balance between the two, because the statistics are important, especially if it involves money. right? So when I think about data, for example, I think about comparative figures. So by doing it this way, we're saving this much money. You got to know what your policymakers uh, agenda is, and they're all different, right? Local, national, and even individual policymakers, what they care about. Are they conservative, not conservative? What do you need to do to sort of help them? But for example, I had a city council in Manassas Park. You're appointed as the school board, not elected. It's a very weird situation, and it creates a very weird dynamic where your boss is actually the city council. Don't like it, can't fix it. But anyhow, but because of that, we would constantly get these little tasks from our city council. And so one of the members, we have a 50% free and reduced lunch population in our school. So there's a very big divide between parental support, between people who work in the home. Different. We have 43 different countries represented in our school, so it's huge. It's a huge difference. And our SAT scores, when you go across, are actually not great as an average for a DMV school, District Maryland, Virginia, sort of this Northern Virginia area, which is considered high education achievement. It doesn't look that great, but I contended that it was because we actually pay for every single eligible student to take the SAT. We don't. We do it for everybody, which means that your average score is going to come down. And I did a paper on it in grad school, and I gave it to the city council person. He was like, okay, but this doesn't, it still makes us look bad. So then I went and got 3 students that I knew had benefited from the program and ended up applying for college and going, and asked them to sit down and have lunch with us. And that made all the difference in the world. He had the stats right in front of him, but hearing that the program actually worked made a huge difference. So, I think if you can find that balance, that's really important. And also not falling back on emotion. I know that sounds counterintuitive. We think storytelling always has to be emotional. If you can make storytelling achievement oriented, that's your best option, right? So it's how does this person or this group of people that I'm talking about actually show that whatever we did, whatever intervention we did, made a difference. I think a lot of times, and I worked for a lot of organizations. Farm Aid is one of the organizations I've worked with for years. When we first started working, what we would do was show a lot of sad farmers, right? I'm about to lose my farm. This is very, very sad. Sorry. Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So anyhow, we would show a lot of sad farmers. Well, what ended up happening is it made them look weak, right? Like that they had no control over their own lives and they could only live if we helped them. Well, that's not doing any of your audiences any favors. So you want to show them as strong as you can. You want to show them with, that they want these experiences, that they want to be part of it, and that we're just lifting up what they already want. So those are some areas that I think really help with storytelling. And I also think you have to be careful to don't call yourself a storyteller unless it's your story. You're a story facilitator. And that's very important because one of the things that we know about all of the diversity that exists in this world is that we really can't tell someone else's story. So if you can look at it as a story facilitator and let people sort of take charge of how they talk about themselves, even to policymakers, bringing them with you and coaching them is great, but let them tell it in their own words. So I could talk forever, but I know that you have so many other good speakers, and I'm available for questions after.
Yeah, thank you for that, Brenda. And thank you for that framing about, making sure that you allow people to tell their story and to be achievement oriented. I think that's really, especially from a policy perspective, thinking about like, what are you trying to solve? What are you trying to get at with this? I think is a really important component when you're talking to lawmakers. We always say, like, what is the ask? What is the so what? So if you start from the beginning of being achievement oriented and goal oriented, I think that naturally tees up that ask to make it feel a little less awkward, a little bit more intuitive. They wanted to say yes. So that's a really great framing for that. Thank you so much. Krista, my next question is for you. So, how critical is storytelling in the current political advocacy space? What are some of the best practices, and how can you tailor the message to wish to convey, excuse me, how can you tailor the message you wish to convey with the stories you share?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I think Brenda covered a bit of this already, but I do think that storytelling is critical for us to understand what's actually happening in schools. I think there's a lot of policymakers and a lot of people across the country that are making some assumptions about what they actually think is occurring in schools. And I think that storytelling piece can help us actually create that empathy and that visioning of what's actually what school communities are really like. When it comes specifically to the kind of school transformation work that we do in community schools and trying to do school partnerships and engage families, I think that it's really critical too, as Brenda kind of mentioned, you're either a story facilitator or you're telling your own story. We can share these stories all day long, but when it is someone sharing their own story, specifically like at a school board, having a family member or a student or a teacher come and share their story about the impact that program has had on their own life, I think that goes far more. In the way of convincing someone that this is an important investment or an important thing to support. So I think it's really critical too that we engage families and students to tell their own stories and help them have the ability and the skills and the confidence to feel like they can share those stories to school board meetings or with school and district leaders. I think at the same time, the messaging piece when working in something complex like community schools is really critical. A lot of the work that we do as far as social services or community schools can be a little bit complex to understand. And I think we start getting into jargon and getting into this place where it's really difficult for people to see what we're describing. So I think not only is that storytelling piece important, but it's also important when we're doing coalition building as far as trying to get folks behind an issue like advocating for community schools or advocating for after school, that we're speaking some consistent messages too. So I think it's critical that there are some boilerplate messages that people can use and then can tailor that with their own stories to provide the evidence of why this is effective. I'll also mention, I think site visits are critical. So we always encourage states to really think about how you take your state representatives on site visits. How do you take your local legislators and your school board members, in fact, into schools to actually experience what's happening and to actually see having a student actually lead a tour and be able to talk about why a community school is so important to them is such a powerful message, I think, when advocating for programs in schools. And then the last thing I'll say is that I think it's really important we make sure that our asks or our messages are tailored. So, doing your research ahead of time, specifically if you're working with a decision maker, to understand their background, understand what drives them, understand their platform, if they're running for office or they're a current political officer, and then also understanding some of their background, what they've done in the past, because we can also make the case that community schools, for instance, if this person has a history as being a dentist, we should connect that back to the kind of dental services that happen in schools as a result of this work. So connecting to their own background. And then making sure that we always have an ask too, that each of these messages always comes with an ask, even if that's we'd like to have your future support or we'd like to invite you on a site visit. Those are all critical pieces of that messaging.
Yeah, thank you for that. I love the idea of storytelling not necessarily being relaying information, but creating opportunity for people to see the story in real life through site visits and speaking with people who have a lived experience. I also just want to underscore too, for those of you on this webinar, I love that Krista highlighted to do your homework and to really know who you're talking to. A big part of my role in preparing for Hill meetings when I go with and meet with members of Congress is I research not only them, but I research their district. I know how many Title I schools they have. I know what the demographic breakdown is of the students in their community, and that really creates those points of connection with them. Like Krista was saying, you know their background, you know what might be something that can incentivize them to want to listen to your story and to want to engage in the issue and the ask that you have for them. So that's thank you for lifting that up, Krista. That's a really important piece of this. Uh, so, Terry, my next question is for you. Uh, what communication channels are most efficient for sharing your impact story to policymakers? How do you ensure your collateral provides the most important information while prioritizing audience comprehension and information retention?
Thanks so much. The joy and challenge of going after these wonderful speakers is that I'm going to both reinforce what they've said and perhaps repeat. But there's a couple things I just want to convey, and let me just say for a little context setting, as was said in my lovely introduction, thank you. I've spent most of my life in the after school and summer space, and although I am a big fan of community schools, my kids were involved in one, and I worked on the community schools revolution. I'm going to phrase a lot of my language here around after school and summer learning, so forgive me if that doesn't quite resonate for everyone, but you'll get the gist, I think. Um, so I want to underscore again what Brenda said. Like, as you're looking for channels, first you got to make sure you're thinking of your message and the match. And so your message, and I'll just repeat a little bit of what she said, like thinking of your story, your statistics, and the stakes, right? So if you're saying we serve 125 students in our program, we've improved their attendance by X%. And if this grant goes away, if this money goes away, we lose 125 seats. So kind of framing a message and thinking, what's at stake for us and what is it that we're trying to explain to people, and then getting to the ask, as Krista said, which is we need to protect these funds for these kids. So you've got your message kind of honed and figured out, and I'll talk for a minute about that too. And then thinking of your match. So I think this other piece of just like policymakers is sometimes a little bit scary or too much. So really, these are just people, right? It's Brenda on the school board or whomever it is. And so really getting down to who are the policymakers we want to influence and knowing a little bit about them personally and their backgrounds. And then thinking, what is it that they read or are influenced by, or what are the mediums that they might be paying attention to? So first thing, please go get their social media handles and tag them appropriately at all kinds of places. They do pay attention to that, giving them gratitude and thanks for things that they're doing that pay attention, and then tagging them on events you're doing, things like that. Um, and really keeping in mind keeping it short, keeping it sweet, and keeping it consistent. So I think to one of the questions about framing your messaging, I definitely would advocate for a message map for whatever you're doing, with kind of a core message. This is who we are, what we do, and this is our ask. And then what are some of the support points? And so getting that message, maybe it's in the form of a one pager. So everyone is like literally on the same page and you can share some of this work is really helpful. Um, I wanted to talk a little bit about thought leadership. I think sometimes people get a little concerned about over communicating, maybe like, oh, I've sent this out. I've sent too many emails out this month. And okay, that's fair. And in our new world of AI driven searches and communications, you almost can't communicate too much. The way that the search engines are happening now, they're really looking at what you're putting on LinkedIn, what you're putting in your social media, what you're putting in your newsletter and your blog. And so if you are taking whatever the message of the moment is, like how my work improves attendance at school, and you're shaping that into different medium, all the different medium you can use, when that gets searched, it'll get rolled up together, and different people will see it. I want to underscore and repeat what Krista said, which is site visits, site visits, site visits. One site visit will do more than 100 emails in making your point, and frankly, can be a real teaching tool for your young people to talk about what the policymaking process is, and then engaging them in that process. I'm going to give you some very specific things. If you do have an after school or summer program and you are worried about the changes with the Department of Ed and the funding through 21st Century Dollars, there's an opportunity right now to participate in a survey through the After School Alliance. So I just put that in the chat. If the link doesn't work, if someone could let me know, I'll get the exact link. Um, but this survey, they're collecting stories right now as they're doing advocacy work on the Hill. I also want to invite you to an upcoming convention if you haven't been involved before with the National After School Association Convention. It's taking place this year in Washington, D.C., March 11th through 14th. And there'll be a pre-conference event for this that's an actual Hill Day. And so if you've never done any advocacy work and you've always wanted to go to the Hill and talk to people and see what that's all about. You can actually do that this year and join the NAA convention. I think when you go to the site, it will say that the Hill Day part is invitation only. We can get you connected to somebody who can invite you. So I'll put my email in the chat in just a minute. So if you are interested in trying a Hill Day, that is a good possibility for you. And then I just wanted to see, I had a third thing. I think it was just site visits. So the survey, the NAA convention, and please do a site visit. But I'll kind of leave you with a little kind of five things, and I'll put this in the chat too, for all your materials and in all your medium to make sure you keep them short, simple, very plain language, very specific with your data, story rich, and shareable. So I'm going to put those in the chat as a cheat sheet as you move forward.
Thank you, Terry. And we also do a Hill Day, an optional Hill Day in March for March for Children and Youth Month.
Oh, good.
And we also have our EPFP program that will also teach you how to be an effective advocate and engage in those Hill meetings. So we'll talk about that more at the end of the call. But my last question is for all three of you. Anyone can start. But with everything that's happening on the federal level, how can educators and advocates use storytelling, smart design, and different communication channels to keep their work visible and make an impact on the local, state, and federal level?
I can jump in first.
Yeah, thanks, Krista.
I think Terry kind of referenced it, no communication is too much. And I think that often when there is an ask or a sense of urgency, we're quick to reach out and ask for something or, advocate for ourselves, but not enough leading up to that. So I think advocate early, advocate often. You want to build this so that that person, maybe it's your legislator, has that context leading up to your ask so that in that moment of urgency, you're not having to help them understand the context of what you're asking for. They already have the context, they already have the information. They've seen a lot of stories and heard a lot of examples of how this work has been effective for your local community. And therefore, it makes it a quicker process for them to potentially be an advocate and sign on to something. So, advocate early, advocate often. Don't wait until that sense of urgency occurs.
And I think
Thanks,
important
Krista.
to note, amen to what Krista said. And on the advocacy word, I just want to address whatever fears that people have about advocate itself, which is advocacy is fine. There's no, it's not a dirty word. It's a good word. It means that we're literally advocating for kids. And for anyone who has concerns between advocacy and lobbying, to really be clear that to lobby means that you're talking about a specific bill, and there's rare that you're going to kind of cross that line. So kind of go crazy. Don't let fear hold you back, and just know that this group is giving you permission to advocate as much and as passionately as you're willing to.
I was going to make that same point. I think don't be afraid. I mean, if you'll know if you're lobbying. Anything else, you know what I mean? Like it'll be very clear that you're lobbying. Someone's going to ask you to do that. Otherwise, everything you're doing is education or advocacy. One of the things that I think has been so important in this environment is making yourself bigger. And what I mean by that is multiplying the number of things that are getting out from a different number of people. Let me use SNAP as an example. All right. Yes, what happened with SNAP was outrageous, scary, terrible, and the impact was going to be absolutely huge for every community, not just the individual families, but even just taking money out of the grocery stores and the businesses and everything, right? But what we ended up doing as a country is we tackled it from so many different ways, right? It wasn't just people who needed food assistance who were yelling. In fact, most of the time they weren't the ones speaking. It was people talking about that impact on community. It was people talking about what it might mean to somebody who's trying to be a working family and can't do it. So all of that layered communication actually worked. Now, did we all get the what we wanted? I have nothing to say about that except SNAP is back. So, in the end, that was the goal, whether everything else went the way you wanted or not. But that doesn't just have to be that you coordinate with the whole country. I'll give you an example, and this is sort of before the age when I would have done this through social media. So I just want to be clear that this is going to be an old school tactic, but they still work. So I was working with Philadelphia City Schools. And so they had this incredible program. It was a 5-year program that had been funded to bring their libraries up to sort of the modern era so that they were library media centers rather than just book repositories, right? And after this 5-year incentive from the foundation that did for all these different school districts, the city or wherever it was supposed to take over the funding, right? So they get to the end of the 5 years, or all right, 4.5 years, and they start realizing that the school board has no idea that any of this has been going on. And suddenly they're going to be asking for quite a bit of money to support these programs. So what we did is we made envelopes, pre-addressed envelopes to every single school board member. And we made enough so that if you were an individual library media specialist in Philadelphia schools, which were just about 120 schools in Philadelphia, you got a little form that you filled out every single week that we gave you, and it said, how much computer time was used in the library, how many classrooms came in to use the new resources, right? Well, every single one of those library media specialists sent those out so that if you were on the school board every week for 4 weeks, you got 120 reports about what was going on in the schools. It cost them nothing. And I'm telling you, after week 2.5, the number of calls into the school system, and I mean, they got funded. And I mean, it was amazing. It was no question they were going to get funded. The board members could not believe that they had pulled that off. And it was so easy. We did it in, I don't know, 25 minutes of, putting things together. So making yourself bigger doesn't have to cost a lot. If you're in a community, and you can have teachers and parents write letters from their own perspectives, right? You can have community members come and stand up at different locations. It's okay to do that. They do need to hear from a lot of places, and they need to hear individual arguments, because if they don't agree with one, they might agree with the 5th one that they hear. So anyhow, that's my lesson. Layering.
Yeah, I think that's great. It reminds me a lot of when I used to work in higher education, and I used to tell my students, I can't fix it if you don't tell me it's broken, right? And so if you don't utilize your network to let your legislators or your school board or whatnot, let them, if they don't know there's a problem to fix, like if you don't utilize people to tell that story, they can't engage in the way that you need them to. So that's a wonderful example. I'm excited to hear what questions you all have who are in our audience and on this call. Feel free to drop them in the chat or come off mute in a few seconds to ask your question. But while you all are thinking of your questions, I'm going to ask one, and I apologize, this is totally off script, but I think you can handle it. I am not a social media person. But I also understand that to be engaged in the world today, you have to be online in some capacity. If you are somebody who is not necessarily into social media, but wants to engage in this practice, is there a specific platform that you recommend? Is there a way to go about doing it that you recommend? Is it LinkedIn? Is it TikTok? Like what should be the medium that people should be engaging, or the platform people should be utilizing? And are there any key strategies when it comes to storytelling on social media?
I'll just jump in to say you should use what's comfortable to you. I would guess that a lot of the people on this
I also can't
are
see
are probably most
the
comfortable
red
on
of this.
LinkedIn.
Um,
And
I'm
so,
just going
yes,
to do my
Linda, I
best to
think you're right.
zoom
It does
through this
depend
so
very
that
much
there
on
are
your
opportunities
audience.
for
Excuse me,
questions and
Terry. If you all
whatnot.
could get yourself on mute, that
Rashona,
would
if
be
there's like
great.
a
Thank you.
There you go.
Go ahead, Terry.
Linda, I totally think it depends on your audience, but if you're just thinking of like, for me, I just want to get started, find the medium that kind of works for you, and probably I would say start on LinkedIn because it's accessible for a lot of people and doesn't feel quite as scary as some of the others. But um, and then the next thing I just want to say is consistency. Like once you join, like you can be a lurker. Of course, many people are lurkers, but it will be more effective if you are commenting on other people's posts. And so, like Krista said, if you wait till the end and ask people to do things for you, um, it's less effective than if along the way you've been on social media saying, "Hey, I like what you're doing," or "Oh, that's a really interesting program," or whatever it is you're commenting on. And then when you put your program out, they're more likely to pay attention and think that you're a part of their community and they would want to share it. So, I start where you can would be my quick answer.
That's great. Thank you. Any other questions? Or anyone else want to respond to that question before I go to our audience?
I mean, I would say all those things are true. You want to do what you're comfortable with. I am not somebody who likes to show my face or be a spokesperson, hence why in the end I ended up being a behind the scenes person. But what I love about LinkedIn, not so much, sorry, I don't know, can you hear my dog barking? Because I can. Anyhow, okay, good.
No, you're
Um,
good.
but what I like about it is that it gives you a chance to be a thought leader by sharing other people's thoughts. So you can share an article that says what you want it to say, share that and give your thoughts at the top, right? Share somebody else's post and say why you agree or disagree. I think that's really helpful. If you're going to do other forms of social media, understand that video is king no matter which one you pick. You don't have to be on TikTok to know that you need video, right? Static photos don't get it anymore. No photo definitely doesn't get it. So digging into social media really does involve a little commitment to either finding video or making your own video.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions in our audience? And if not, I have a couple more I can keep asking. Feel free to drop it in the chat or come off mute. Oh, what are reasonable goals? That is from Linda Anderson. I'm assuming that's regards to what is a reasonable ask as part of your storytelling.
Well,
That's how I'm
and
interpreting that
also
question. Oh,
well,
please
and
go
also,
ahead.
well, and also to measure the success of your campaign. Is it more reasonable to measure engagement? Is it more reasonable to measure followers? Or are you measuring the outcome to determine which is how much did you get for your ask? To determine. So I ask because for the newcomers that's going into the social space to get your story out there, like you have to have some kind of way to like you have your base, you have your benchmark, but there's some kind of way to measure or create a goal. And it's intimidating when you're first starting out, or even if you've been doing it for a while to decide, okay, what is the best way? Am I looking at growing my followers, or am I looking at engagement, or am I looking at other, other factors, especially if you have more than one social, like we're a network, so we have multiple schools, so we manage like at least 5 socials on all the platforms.
I think it's a really good question. And I also think it depends on where you are as far as your establishment, right? If you're not doing much at all, it's different than if you're doing a lot. But overall, I love the term objectives versus goals. And the reason I say that is because it's measurable steps along the way. So to me, like for instance, my first objective, if I didn't have one, would be I get to celebrate. Now I have a social media account, right? And then the next one would be, I posted 5 pieces of content this month. And then the next one would be, I have 12 followers. I think when you're more established, the metrics you really want to look at are about 10 to 20% growth of all of your metrics throughout the year, right? So that's engagement, all those things. But the other thing you have to remember is that these platforms are constantly changing. So don't kill yourself because, oh my gosh, we didn't get any growth this year, right? Sometimes you won't get a lot of follower growth, but suddenly your engagement will go up. People are really paying attention. They're sharing your content. They're talking to you and leaving comments, good comments, not ones you have to hide. That's a really good objective to have. But I think, all of those things are important, but I think doing the thing and making it work for wherever you are in the system or in your growth area is probably the best way to go.
I want to double tap on everything Brenda just said, and also think of it in a couple different ways of like input goals. So I might set a goal to tell 24 stories in the next year. So that's 2 stories a month, how I shape those, et cetera, and have a plan for that. So input goals. And then your leading indicators might be things like followers and engagement, those things. And then your lagging indicators are policy outcomes, other things like that actually are your ultimate goals. So you might start to create a checklist, right? Here's the things we can control very easily. Here's the things we can watch to see if it's sticking. And here's what we actually want to achieve.
The only thing I'll add to is just a simple way to think about it. I'm not a messaging person necessarily, but I know in our organization we use results-based accountability a lot for thinking about how we measure the things that we do. And so for us, it comes down to 3 questions. How much did we do? How well did we do it? And is anyone better off? So the how much would be, how many engagements did we have with legislators? The how well did we do it? How many people engaged in that? And what was the outcome of those meetings? And then is anyone better off? Did that policy get passed or did we grow our champions? So that's an easy way to think about it.
Mhm.
Yeah, such a great framework to work from. Thank you for lifting that up, Krista. We have another question in the chat. What is the best strategy to use when sharing content from a school that is within a larger school system that has limitations and or checkpoints on what content can be shared to the public? And thank you, Katie, for that question.
I can add some context that might help.
Please, yeah.
Like it's a large district where one school that's trying to implement community school strategies and in order to try and create these better influences and then replicate if successful. And so we have certain permissions at this one school, but we are part of a larger district system that has a lot of checkpoints on what can be released publicly. Yet we want to tell our story as much as possible.
I guess I'd say, something that may be helpful is a process in place for this, like a red light, yellow light, green light kind of system, that describes what are green light messages, what are the things kind of that you're able to share without having to think too much about it, what are the yellow lights, the kind of pauses that you need to take and maybe get some approval, and then the red light that it needs to go higher up the chain to get approval. I think also, there can be times when working through the bureaucracy of a school system can be really challenging. And in those times, I always think about how we engage partners. It doesn't always have to be our message shared from us, from our mouths that comes out. I think there are a lot of partners engaged in community schools that often can share stories on our behalf about an experience or a story of impact that happened in the school system. So that may be a way of thinking of how you engage more folks, and telling that story doesn't always have to come from your channels either.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I love that, Krista. And the other thing, to not let your communications take over your life. Most organizations will do some kind of a content calendar, and most organizations we work with think of this like quarterly, but you could do the whole year if you wanted. And if you kind of mapped out the stories you want to tell, or the data points you want to give, or the things that you want to kind of advocate for, and then met with your school district maybe and like said, here's our content calendar, what looks good, what doesn't look good, um, maybe would help mitigate some of the last minute panic that people have when they're not quite sure if it's okay.
Yeah, we have another question in the chat. Fabricio asks, Any suggestions on the best way to address current challenges related to DEI?
Fabricio, I would love to address this question. Can you tell me a little more what you're thinking?
Well, as you know, we are getting a lot of challenges in the states, different states. I'm in Illinois, and people are challenging diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. And so, the government is challenging funding. So there is a whole chaos following up on many school districts because issues of funding, especially funding. So we are facing dramatic challenges.
I mean, I get it. A lot of my clients are federal grantees, they're state grantee. I mean, wherever the money comes from, they get to make the rules, even if we don't think it's fair. What I will say is that just because you practice something doesn't mean you need to call it that. And so, look, I think one of the interesting things about education is that I've found that educators tend to be the people who started all these DEI practices way before everybody else, right? Individualized education plans, that's come from somewhere, right? I mean, we know that students and families are all individuals. And I think the concepts behind these policies, the way that we treat people, the programs that we allow people to participate in, I think they are all just education. They're not DEI. And I know that seems like it's too simple, but I've really found we're a federal contractor, but we've always, I mean, we're started by we're a Hispanic woman-owned firm, and we're not going to give up on these values. These values are important to us. And so I think you just keep practicing the values and just don't label them that anymore. The label, I think, is more disturbing to people than the actual issues, because the people who are afraid of it also have benefited from it. So that's how we've dealt with it.
And just to underscore, having meetings with your boards or your advisories or whoever it is of like, this is what we stand for and this is what we're going to stick with, and know that those are trade-offs. But I think having conversations with your board and partners is absolutely key.
I have one more question for you all, but I'm curious if anyone else in our audience has a question. If not, I will go ahead and ask my last question, which is, if you had one piece of essential advice for educators and advocates trying to share their policy story, what would it be? Or what is one action item that our participants could take away from our conversation today?
I'm
I think
gonna.
my message. Oh, go ahead, Terry.
Sorry, I might take yours then. Well, I say one and I won't say the two. But the one is tell a story a month. Just pick that. Tell a story with a story, a stat, and use the stakes. Like what's at stake from it. Once a month, wherever you can do it, whatever medium you have, and just kind of get that muscle under you.
Similarly, I would say again, advocate early, often. Don't wait until the urgency of the moment. And remember that a lot of these decisions that are made require relational trust. Relational trust is built by that, long-term relationship where there are continued communications and storytelling and getting to actually know each other as humans as well. So I think that relational trust is actually a critical piece in encouraging folks to be supportive of different programs and policies. So don't wait to start building those relationships.
And I would say school boards are the perfect training ground. I think here's when we saw educators. We saw them when they were concerned about how the contracts might come out, right, or how that might affect them. and we saw them when they were forced to come and talk about a program, right? Their building manager, the principal said, nope, you got to go in, or the superintendent said, I need to see all the principals. Look, I'm happy to see you then. But when I really want to see you is when you come in and say, hey, I just want you to know how the decisions you've made this year have impacted my students. Here's an example, right? Tell them that the work they're doing for $2,000 a year is, again, not there for the money, clearly. That work that they're doing is making an impact on your students, right? Tell them that and coordinate, right, throughout your building. Say, okay, this is your turn. You feature your student today. Bring a student in, showcase something. And it doesn't have to be all coordinated. Just figure out, what are you excited about? What's happening that was funded by the school that you're really grateful for? And these things, when you practice them and people get excited about them, it helps you then talk to higher stakes policy leaders, right? Like your state leaders and all of that. But you got to practice it. Otherwise, you're way too formal and not as human as really all of this outreach ought to be. It's all about humans. It's all about us working together and relating to each other. And if you can practice that at some place like a school board meeting, it's really going to layer up to everybody else.
Yeah, thank you for that. I say a lot of my job is just building and maintaining relationships. That's, like everything else in the world, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And if we want to achieve our policy goals, it's all about building networks and relationships and getting to know people and helping them winning them over through advocacy to fight the good fight. So I want to thank all of our speakers for being here today, and for their words of wisdom and insight. I learned a lot from today's conversation. I hope you all did too. With that, we would love to know what you thought of our webinar. We have an evaluation, so we would love to see what your thoughts are. Please don't hesitate to provide us that feedback, and we'll drop that in the chat in a moment. I also wanted to let you all know that we have some professional development opportunities coming up. So we have our EPFP program, our Education Fellowship Policy Program. The applications for that program are due November 30th, so that's coming up quick, fast, and in a hurry. So please apply for that program if you're interested. It is a 8-week fellowship program where we teach you everything you need to know about advocating for the issues that you care about and that impact your community, and that culminates with a one-day seminar in Washington or a hybrid option. And we also have a Hill Day model built into that. Our next big convening is going to be December 2nd at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and that's a town hall with children's funding projects. So we encourage you to participate in that. And that is all I have for you today. We are super excited that you were here. And we hope, excuse me, sorry. And we also have our conference coming up May 27th through the 29th. And we are going to be in Long Beach, California. So please, registration is open for that right now. I believe we have a call for programs open for that as well. So we encourage you to join us there. This is our annual conference, and it's always a fantastic time, a great opportunity to practice that networking and advocacy skills. So we hope that you will join us in May. And with that, that is all I have for you today. Thank you for being here. And if you have any questions, we'll drop our information in the chat. And with that, have a good day and have a good Thanksgiving. Thanks, everyone.